The following episode of the Comics and Crypto podcast is for informational purposes only, and anything expressed by the hosts or their guests is solely their opinion. This podcast does not constitute financial advice, and anyone wishing to invest should seek their own independent financial or professional help. Have fun and enjoy the show.
Hi, I'm Sean O'Hare, and I know comics.
Hi, I'm Spencer Vogel, and I know crypto.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lee Loader, and I don't know shit. This is the Comics and Crypto podcast.
Comics and crypto, crypto and comics, collectors world in a digital age. Comics and crypto, crypto and comics, it's where the next billionaires will be rich. Comics and crypto.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. We are here with our amazing good friend of the podcast and sponsor, Ali Karaouni, owner of Elite Comics 11. Hey, Ali.
How's it going?
Hey, Ali, thanks for joining us.
Good. Thanks so much for joining us today, man. This is great. We've known each other for at least a couple of years now, right?
Yeah, time flies. It's been at least a couple of years. Yeah. Wow.
I've been so excited to do this interview with you, man. This is really so. For everybody who's new to the podcast, Elite Comics 11 and Comics and Crypto are collaborating, and we are figuring out ways to bridge the worlds of digital and physical collecting. So we're very excited about this opportunity, and we have a lot of really cool ideas that we're excited to talk to you all about in the future. So how'd you do on the drop today?
I found a new way to fail at the drop today. So for the first time ever, I accidentally ended up hitting preview comics. So yeah, I didn't get one. I still showed up, and showing up is not enough.
Yeah, I was
I didn't
actually
get it
pretty.
either.
Have you guys seen the marketplace prices? I'm actually pretty surprised how low the prices are for this comic today.
Oh, I didn't have a chance to check. I just was mostly just blaming myself and wanted.
So Ali, just real quick, how would you describe this comic that dropped today on VEVE, Captain America 117? Would you say it's a significant book?
I mean, it's significant. You got a first appearance of a character that, essentially had their own show, and there's future projects in line. So it's significant in that way, at least in the physical space. It's definitely not what we would consider like a fundamental key, but it's going to be interesting to see how the VEVE community accepts this one.
Do you think it's a pretty popular book? Like, do you see a lot of definitely some upside to this comic in the future?
In terms of, at least again, like my comments are mostly coming from the physical world.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what I'm asking.
We're so tied to the MCU, and so if they're going to continue that storyline where the Falcon is going to basically take on Captain America's role, then yeah, I could see some upside there for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. So maybe we could dive a little bit directly into Elite Comics. You want to tell us a little about Elite Comics 11 and how you came up with the idea?
Yeah, sure. So Elite Comics 11, it's at Elite_Comics 11 on Instagram. And so we are the platform's premier consignment page. So we're helping people in the community sell their books through our page. We also help stores and dealers basically around the world sell comics as well. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and as a kid, I had a humble beginning. So I collected the things I love like a kid. Whenever I could, I would ask my parents for stuff. And like the crazy stuff we're going to talk about today, there's no way in the world I could have ever had that. So so I just collected, kid things, and I go through life, and I go to college, and then I go to law school, and I have my investments going, and then at some point something clicks, and I'm like, hey, I like to have some fun alternate investments. And I'm like, well, what's out there that's scarce and will probably continue to appreciate? I have enough stocks and stuff like that. Like, what else could I do? So then I start looking around, and I'm like, what about some Stan Lee stuff, like some kind of some of these things I could never afford but I always wanted. So anyways, long story not so short, I end up after a ton of thought just saying, I'm going to go buy a copy of Amazing Spider-Man #1. And it's $7,000, and it was a 4.0. And I'm like, it was one of the biggest decisions I ever made, just because I didn't even know if I was just being had or should I get it or not. So anyways, I get it. And just in the process of asking people, hey, do you know about this? And hey, do you know anyone that knows about this? I kind of just start making these connections. And I'm just, at some point, one thing leads to another. And then I'm picking up different books and I'm meeting more and more people. And all of a sudden I'm like, hey, I have a pretty good network for these comics where I could find them like at pretty well below market rate. Why don't I just do some of the buying and flipping kind of thing? So I did that. And also I got to the point where I had really good contacts that just didn't want anything to do with the online space. So I actually started doing consignments originally on Facebook. I would do a bunch of consignment posts with permission. And if books sold, then, I'd carry out that transaction. So my business started on Facebook when I was just kind of messing around here and there. And then eventually, when that became a thing, I have a Facebook group. We still have it. It's called the Vintage Comics Group on Facebook. So eventually one of my friends just nudged me, hey, you got to try Instagram. And I'm like, why do I want to go to Instagram? Like, I'll just post selfies on there. And what does that have to do with this? Like, just try it. Like the community, it's like a lot more, positive, less trolls. So I try it. One thing leads to another. Fast forward through a lot of steps. And then all of a sudden you have like the premier consignment page for comics on Instagram. So
you guys are absolutely crushing it. I mean, your fan base is growing so much every day. It's incredible.
Well, we call ourselves, and it's true, we're the platform's #1 community powered comic sales page. And it's because that's exactly what it is. Like, we're only as good as our incredible community, and it just keeps getting better and better. So we necessarily rely on our community.
That's amazing. And that's, that connection with VEVE is so strong as well. I mean, their community is absolutely incredible, and I'm very excited for these two worlds to combine. It's going to be a very exciting future for both.
Indeed.
So, if somebody wanted to buy comics on Elite Comics 11, how would they go about that? And what if they want to sell some comics on there as well?
Yeah, so if you want to buy, it's pretty easy. You just go to our page, and you're going to see like just constantly like these really high quality like Grails and investment type books. Like they're graded already on the page. You'll see that. So a post will appear, it'll have a price, it'll say claim in the comments, or DM best offer to risk it. And what that means is if you want that book and you want to commit to buying it, you simply have to write claim first in the comment section, and then we're going to treat it as you're in control. The book's basically set aside for you until, we reach out to you and ask for payment. And then, so that's the buying side's that. And then the same kind of rule applies to our live sales, which are almost daily, where we bring in comic book sellers almost every day. And they show you a bunch of books, and some of those are raw, not graded. If you want those, you just write the price first in the chat. And then same thing, you're in control there for that book. And we do expect people to honor their claims, which isn't a big problem because we have a great community. And then to sell, the process in a nutshell, it's pretty straightforward. You're going to have to provide some references, so we feel, we know who we're dealing with, but we know a lot of people. So usually your references will be friends of friends or just our friends. So we require that. But once that's out of the way, it's just simply send us quality pictures of the front and back of the comic you want. And we kind of collaborate to figure out a fair listing price based on actual sales data. And then we post it up for sale. And if more like when it sells, the person that has us list the book simply sends it to whoever the buyer is. So we're the broker in the deal.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I've actually, a lot of my best books that I own have all of the best books that I've owned have come from Elite Comics 11.
Yeah,
same there.
FF 48. I got an 8.0 last a year and a half ago, I think. That and Silver Surfer 1 in 8.5. And those are by far my favorite comics by far. And yeah, I got those on Elite. Yeah.
Yeah, my first ever book was from Elite, which is Secret Wars #1, 9.8 with a newsstand. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was pressing Spencer for so long to find that, and when we saw it on there, I was like, Spencer, get it, claim.
Got it. There's an immediate claim. There was no brokering or bartering on that one. I was like,
It's-
nope, we're getting that.
It's exciting too, because especially now with the speculation of Secret Wars, it's getting so much stronger, and yeah, that's exciting book right now for us.
Did you see that? You saw that big sale of Secret Wars #8, the original art page of the first appearance of Spidey in the black suit?
Yeah.
That was incredible.
It
Wow,
broke 3 million, right?
that's
insane.
incredible. Wow, man. Do you think that tied into the speculation as well, or do you think just because of what it represented, it was the first? What are your thoughts on that?
We're gonna get into it, I think, but this concept of scarcity, like it even applies there, of course. Like, I think everybody loves the black suit and Venom, and it just so happens that those first appearances are, pretty, like they were pretty well produced. There's like a lot of those. So imagine that whole huge part of like the pop culture psyche with the black suit, and you actually own the one of one original art panel where that first appeared. That's crazy. That's insane. So yeah, I mean, is that spec, or is that just, it's almost like investing in the next chapter of Americana?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like owning the original cover for your Ultimate Fallout 4. I mean, can you imagine that? That's incredible. Or ASM 300. That'd be unreal.
So you guys recently started accepting cryptocurrency, which is super exciting. So I wanted to know, basically, why did you guys decide to start accepting crypto?
Yeah, so crypto is something I've been following for at least a few years, and I've definitely been following like that kind of movement and the adoption of crypto. And one thing I've been fascinated the whole time with is kind of seeing the relationship, the positive and negative correlations, and just kind of evaluating between crypto and comics. And it became like apparent to me that a lot of people with crypto look to comics more and more as like a way to store value, just strategically, and also realize some growth as well. And so, these are, a lot of these people are, they're clients, they're people in our community, and they've asked me several times, hey, can you guys take crypto? Because I'm coming at this from the crypto world, and that would be awesome if you guys would start doing that. So as a broker page, I'm always trying to say yes when it makes sense. It makes sense. As a broker page, we're somewhat limited because we actually have to have we have to have a seller that is willing to take the crypto. So we get a lot of questions like, we take this coin and that coin and this coin. And the answer is like, I'd love to. Our limitation though is that we have to have a seller that would accept that type of coin. So to answer your question, there's this new exciting segment of crypto people that for one reason or another, they prefer to be able to purchase these comics in crypto instead of doing any conversions. And then there's also, of course, like the VEVE community and the NFT community, and they also are a big part of crypto, of course. So that's why it's a new exciting market, and I thought that it would be great to at least try to offer something that might make it easier for them to pick up some of these awesome books.
That's awesome.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely one of those crypto people who made some money in crypto and wanted to diversify into other alternative assets. And Sean introduced me to comics, luckily, and never looked back.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of friends that are like, I'm crypto rich. I'm not rich, but I'm crypto rich. And I want to spend that. I want to spend that crypto money.
Exactly.
The last thing on that, just because there's probably going to be some people checking out the page for the first time. So the crypto posts, they will actually like designate, like you'll see the icons of the different crypto that are accepted when it is a crypto post. So we're trying to provide more and more of those type of posts. But again, it comes down to sellers being open or requesting that type of payment. But other than that, US dollars is always accepted. So,
and just so everyone knows, we'll have a visual example to the side of the screen right now. So what you're seeing right now, this is basically an example of what it would look like if crypto was available for purchase for the comic.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, and what's really cool about that, Ali, is these, like for NFTs, these massive sales that are happening, they're advertising dollar signs, but they're really bought in Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? So we haven't really seen big sales happen for collectibles with crypto yet. but we're seeing with NFTs. I mean, the highest sale of all time. I mean, I think there was a record broken recently, but for sure biggest sale was for $69 million, and it was one NFT. It was a one of one NFT, and I can only imagine what these comic books are going to sell for, and especially like for Amazing Fantasy 15, like a 9.6. Can you imagine what a sale like that would be if it had the option to buy with crypto?
Yeah, I think this crossover is just getting started. So, I mean, I think that those stories are pretty much relatively just around the corner. I mean, because this is definitely what I think is like just the beginning of this relationship between the NFT space and the physical world. So,
and Ollie, you understanding that right now is you're so far ahead, because I've been to a lot of comic shops and they are very discouraged by it. They're very much, and I understand, because they don't understand it, and it's a threat to their business. At the end of the day, that's the way I see it, the way they feel that way, because they don't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, but I would say, like, I don't know if it's like a threat to their business. I think it's just, so basically, and this is like one of the areas we discussed that we probably would get into, which is just, are people from the physical comic world going to come into the NFT space? And I think like a lot of them are, because of course, like there's tremendous growth like in the NFT space. They're going to identify that. Some segment of the physical world is going to identify that and want to be a part of that, because they're going to look at it as investments. And then it's not just an investment. It also, at least in the case of VEVE, is using IP that we all share in common. So it's a lot better. It's a lot easier to jump on board that, because it's relatable in that sense. But I just wanted to say, like, a big part of the comic market, they're into physical things. Like, they are coming from a place where they want the book that they held in their hands when they were a kid, or that their parents held in their hands and read to them. So it's a lot, because they're coming from that background. It's like that much harder for some of them to jump on board something that's completely electronic. Like, there's no physical component to it. So it's just, I'm not surprised that there's some resistance there.
Yeah, and that's why every time Spencer and I go into a comic shop, we definitely bring up VEVE. We try to explain, just so like to educate a little bit, so they understand, like, this world of collecting is only getting bigger. It's expanding. It's not going in digital or just physical format. It's so many people who've gotten involved with VEVE were never collectors in their lives, and now they're going into comic shops. They're buying physical statues. They're buying physical comic books, and they're excited about it.
Yeah,
I'm literally getting chills right now talking about this. Like, it is so exciting. I mean, Spencer and I have literally consumed this space for the past 6 to 8 months, and it's been incredible. It's been incredible to see how many people are in love with collecting now. It also obviously investing, but but also collecting, which is really exciting. Really exciting.
And I thought, like, so I'm also proud to announce that, I did pick up the Ghost Spider, like the Spider Gwen. And so, like, I don't want to admit like how much time I spent yesterday, like with the augmented reality, just like placing her next to my dog and hanging up on the wall. And just, it was just cool to be able to do something like that, because, a lot of times with some of these comics, like, you kind of get them, you have them, and that's awesome, but they're kind of encased in plastic, so you kind of tuck them away, and a lot of people don't even really see them very often. So
that's a really good point, and that's the kind of, and what VEVE has an opportunity there is you're able to actually read them.
Yeah,
and that's a really interesting opportunity as well.
So Ali, what is the biggest sale that you've ever had on your page?
Yeah, so the biggest sale to date, single book sale, was an XMen #1. It was a CGC graded copy in a 9.0. So that sold for 160,000. So that single book record, that's it so far. But I'm looking forward to breaking that.
Wow. That must have made you a little nervous to be moving around that much money in escrow.
Like I said, I mean, most of our transactions at this point, they're happening with like repeatedly proven sellers. So the thing that makes me nervous mostly would be like, postal carriers, which we insure against, stuff like that. But we have a really great trusted we have a set of clients that we work with, so that
Yeah,
part, is pretty. I don't really stress out about that part as much as the mail.
yeah. Reputation is a really big deal,
Yeah.
and people who are very involved in the community, and same with VEVE, as a lot of people know, reputation is a huge deal. And the more you're involved, the bigger your reputation. And
And one of the things I take like a lot of pride in, I mean, a lot of people can just say, oh, I'm a consignment page, I'm selling books for people. It's not that hard to do all that. But I'll tell you this, you in the community, people might say this or say that or whatever, but nobody's going to tell you that they bought something off Elite Comics 11 and got burned. Like, we take care of everyone, everything you buy on our page. If things go sideways, we're backing you up, like, period. And that's kind of why we have the reputation that we have.
100%. And I've actually been involved in a couple times. Actually, I sent a book out, and I think the bottom right corner had a chip in it, and they contacted you guys about it. And I legit didn't even know about it, and we figured it out together. We all worked it out, and it was great. But that's the kind of customer service that you guys have, man, and it's incredible. It's incredible. Everyone's in really safe hands, the buyer and seller. What are some of the most valuable types of comics, and why are they so valuable?
It's supply and demand. So, like, there's two sides to the coin to, like, determine what the price is. I think supply is a lot more straightforward. I mean, how many were made? How many exist still? How many of these particular things are there? And then there's demand. So a lot of people like fixate on supply. They'll just say, like, there's X number, so that, there's not that many of them. Okay, that's just part of the story, though. The bigger story is demand. So because demand potentially has the power to overcome supply in ways that you might not expect. Demand is comprised of how many people are in the market, how many potential buyers are there in the pool, and then that is largely determined by relevance. So whatever IP we're talking about, or whatever book we're talking about, how many people want that? So, and that depends on, nowadays is this character in the MCU? Are they coming? Is there news that they might be coming? Also, are they in TV shows, movies? Like, are we familiar with this character from like a long lineage of, or a pedigree of like books for decades? Has the IP jumped generations? Is it part of the pop culture psyche? So anyways, so what does that mean? It means that, like, of course, Action Comics 1 and Detective Comics 27, of course, they're relevant. Tons of people want them. They're scarce. There's hardly any of them. So, of course, you're going to see, like, astronomical prices. But what I'm talking about also, and I just think people really discount, like, the demand side of this equation, is books like Incredible Hulk 181, which is the first appearance of Wolverine, or Ultimate Fallout 4, first Miles Morales. Like, there's a lot. They made a lot of those books, but there's a lot of demand for those books because of the relevance that they continue to have and that they're gonna have. So those books are still worth, like, way more than some of these much more scarce books that have less demand because they're not relevant. Like, we see this with the Golden Age. Yeah, Golden Age is hot. People are picking it up, but it's certain Golden Age that resonate with people. There are many, many examples of old scarce books you couldn't sell if you wanted to, because nobody wants to buy them because they're just not perceived as relevant anymore. So it's not all about scarcity. So to answer your question, the books that are worth the most, they have to be successful on both the low, they have to be somewhat scarce compared to their, the relative demand. And that's derived in large part by the relevance that those.
So I think we all definitely agree scarcity is very important, but would you say that popularity is more important than scarcity?
I think it's more dynamic to really analyze that side of the equation, because, the scarcity thing, it's easy to find that out. You could find out how many copies are in the census. Like in comics, we have the census, and yeah, it's not the whole story, but it gives us a pretty good idea of how many are out there.
Yeah.
But you know, if you really want to spec on something, for example, like if you're in the spec game, you want to try to predict this some type of boom or change in the demand. And usually nowadays that's because there's some announcement that some character that wasn't so relevant is about to become a lot more relevant very soon. And so that's what really drives the price up, especially like in the speculation circles.
So you would say speculation is a very important part of the process for investing in comic books.
I think it's definitely a big, I don't want to be too judgmental, but it's positive for the industry in the sense that a lot of these keys, comic keys, and again, I'm coming from the physical space primarily, like a lot of these keys, they've gotten to the price point where like people can't, the entry ticket to own some of these books is like, it's just not, there's a small percentage of people that can kind of play at that level. So I think the spec game's great because people want to have, people want to win, they want their investments to turn out. Within the speculation circles, the doors are open to a lot more people to have a chance to like get into like this investment world. So I know that people are negative on spec and like, people would say, oh, it's killing this or killing that. But I think it's healthy that, even people that can't afford these crazy books might be able to like, approach this as an investment and also, afford to basically, have some stakes in the game on the investment front. But I still think people should be collecting what they love as well. But I think that's a different thing. I think they should enjoy the properties, on a collecting level. But if I'm understanding this line of questioning right, it's more about, we're talking about investment right now.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I emphasize to the community the importance of research. Speculation is obviously important, but at the end of the day, you got to put the time in. You can't just go off one article and say, oh, this might be coming because this one article said it. No. Do your research, really dive deep. Ali, one of my proudest moments was, there's been a lot of speculation that the Submariner is going to be in Wakanda Forever, which is the sequel to Black Panther. And I've heard this news for a while, and then I bought a 9.6 of Submariner #1, and I bought it for around like $2,500.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, like I think a day or two later, there was a photo that was released on set of the crew filming underwater, like in a water tank, at Wakanda Forever on set, and then the book like doubled.
Yeah,
it almost 2 to 3x. And I was so proud of that. I was so proud of that purchase because that's an excellent example of putting the time in, doing your research, and understanding the process, and then pulling the trigger when you find the right moment. And always be ready to find good opportunity.
And it doesn't always work out, right? But
no. Yeah.
It's like a lot of things. Like you got to trust the process, right? Like you put in the work, you do your research. And sometimes, especially when you're really trying to really take a pure speculative move, sometimes it's not going to work out, right? But you felt comfortable with your process and just realized to just be responsible about it, because sometimes it's not going to work out the way you thought it was going to in terms of, appreciation or whatever. So at the end of the day, I guess this is more of like just self-reflection is, if you feel comfortable about your process and your research, you take a shot. Like, don't beat yourself up too hard if it doesn't exactly work out the way you want, because you learn from it. So why did I trust that one article I saw? I should have corroborated it with other sources and not overreacted. So just don't. I guess I just want to caution people to not overreact to every blurb that's put out there, especially if you're going to go out and spend decent money, money that, it might not end up being true, like whatever is being reported. So
the risk reward is always there. You got to really assess that.
Yeah.
With comics, do you consider yourself more of a collector or an investor?
Yeah, so for this one, as the owner of Elite Comics 11 and kind of everything that comes up nowadays, I'm definitely more of an investor, just because that's I think in terms of like charts and data and like, you know, growth, that's kind of where I spend most of my time. But that doesn't mean like I'm not a collector. So I am a collector. I am a child of the 80s and 90s, so I definitely have some of that, some of the 80s and 90s in my own personal collection, and they're not necessarily the most valuable things I have, but I honestly, I probably love them more than some of the more valuable things. So
Really? Yeah, that was going to be
couldn't
my
tell.
next question is like what your favorite types are going to be. It's the 80s and 90s. Wow. Nice.
Got my Ultimate Warrior back there, Hasbro sealed. I got my, you can't see it, but the Voltron, that's like the Go Lion diecast.
That dropped as a statue on VEVE, by the way, a Voltron.
Yeah, but it's the new age one. I want the, you can't see it 'cause it's cut off, but
That's
it's right
awesome.
there. That's the OG one.
Yes.
Other things.
Oh, shoot.
Mario, right?
And by the yeah, elaborate on that a little bit, because I don't think a lot of the community knows that not just comic books are graded, but also video games, and they go for an insane premium. Specifically, Mario. Mario is considered one of the Grails, if not the Grail of video games.
So I consider this the greatest video game ever made, and it's
Agreed.
a huge part of my childhood. So I definitely had to pick one of these up. So yeah, this is our friends over at WADA. They grade video games, and so it's like a slab, but for video games, and there's like subgrades, kind of like what the card grading does, and then also, of course, similar to CGC, this is a 9.0 with an A+ seal. So this is actually still sealed, so nobody's ever opened this. So on a personal note, I actually just, you didn't know about this, but I wanted to bring this out just because this is an example of something that's very relevant in general, but relevant to me. And that's why I own this, because it's my childhood. And then similarly, here's a He-Man, still
Yes,
sealed.
That's awesome.
This is also Grail, and this is, yeah, the 8-back, the original release, the first series. So this is something I had to have as well, just because it's a part of my childhood. And I just wanted to highlight at this point, we were talking about supply and demand. So part of this demand, I wanted to focus on people kind of my generation, like, you know, I'm basically 40 at this point. I'm 39, but I'm going to turn 40 right here shortly. So people kind of around this age, they tend to like have a lot more disposable income than they did before. And it's like, what do they want to do? One of the first things they want to do, assuming that they do have this disposable income, is they want to recapture their childhood. We've seen it for generations now. It's just everyone's childhoods have been different. Like, you know, the past generation, their childhood was like a lot of the Silver Age kind of keys. The first thing they did is they went to get that, and there was growth involved. I just want to point out that 80s and 90s, like that generation is kind of reaching this age now where they have a lot more discretionary income and disposable income to splurge on things from their childhood. So the 80s and 90s is a very interesting time frame to invest in right now. Again, I'm not giving investment advice, but I'm just letting you know my personal opinion. So it's an interesting era, but particularly in the 90s, a lot of things were overproduced. So, you know, just be aware that there's like a lot of things from the 90s, especially, that are out there. So
like Spawn.
Yeah, or like Beanie Babies.
What about this? Out of all the books I own, this is what I consider to be the greatest comic cover of all time. XMen #1. All right, this Magneto cover, Jim Lee, an iconic. There was they might have printed 1 million of these.
Yeah.
All right, but like, whatever. This is like, I have to have this. Like, it's not worth that much. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's worth like a couple hundred or something, but like, who cares? This is like an incredible piece of my PC, just because, you know, it's from the 90s. Like this is as 90s as you can get in a lot of ways. So that's an example of something that's not necessarily like, I have some investment books we'll go into, but that's an example of some stuff that I just kind of hang on to as a collector.
I love that. And I see the turtle toys down there too. Actually, I know you know this, but I have a couple turtle toys myself that are unopened as well. And that was a huge part of my childhood too. Big part of my childhood. And actually, they released some turtle NFTs with Funko. And what's really, did you hear about that at all?
No, but it sounds like the more of these drops that happen, I'm just gonna have to hand somebody my wallet.
What's really cool about this, Ollie, is it was the first ever Funko NFTs, and it was licensed through Ninja Turtles, so it was a Ninja Turtles drop, and they had a limited edition. I think was it 999, Spencer, for the
999 of them.
And what you did was, if you owned an NFT of this Grail, you could actually claim a physical counterpart. So you own also the physical Funko NFT or Funko doll. That's also limited to 999. So that's another. I love that so much because it emphasizes our philosophy or our belief in connecting the physical and digital, which is really, really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge Turtles fan. Actually, on that point, look at this.
Yeah, let's see it.
So they made a few more than 999, but
oh my gosh! Wow.
This is the first print, Turtle #1.
That's awesome.
I sent a tweet out maybe a few weeks ago about the significance of this comic, and a lot of people just have no idea how valuable this comic is. The first print specifically, they did four or five printings, but the first print only had 2,200 copies. Ollie, is that right? Around 2,200.
I think that the official print run was about 3,000.
3,000
stories about a good number of them actually being damaged or destroyed. So the census is much lower than that. But yeah, I mean,
that's incredible.
This is a perfect, so when you're dealing with numbers like that, I mean, who grew up in our demographic, our age group, and didn't love the Turtles? So
not many.
You get us having some discretionary income, and how many people across the world want a copy of this book? And even from its inception, they only made 3,000 of them, and we lost a lot of copies. So of course there's a ton of demand for this, and the supply is not getting greater. So anyways, this is a CGC 9.2 white. I try not to ever look at the prices on these because you're that much closer to selling them when you find out. This has got, I don't know, I would say it's probably around 40 something grand probably for a 9.2 right now.
That's incredible. And just so everybody knows, a record sale happened was it over the summer or recently for a 9.8, and it sold for $250,000 around there.
Yeah, I think if I'm right, I think that there's been 2 reported sales now at 250,000 back to
unreal. That's incredible.
So yeah, so anyways, yeah, Turtles, love Turtles.
Yeah, well, so we're going over some very expensive books, but what do you think are some of the most undervalued books right now?
Well, I mean, they're still expensive, but I do think the Fantastic Four properties, like XMen, Fantastic Four, I think everyone realizes that the futures that those franchises have. I mean, the mouse didn't pay $1 bazillion for nothing. Those characters are coming, and they're gonna come, and when Mickey writes a check like that, they're going to use it. So that's a good area. Fantastic Four. You were talking about, Submariner. I mean, I'm sure you would think he will probably be part of this too. So, in terms of the inexpensive part, or relatively inexpensive, how about this? A lot of ideas. Let's talk about. Let's go with Star Wars. I think Star Wars, I mean, I don't know if you guys are watching the TV shows on Disney Plus, but I mean, Ahsoka Tano, this Star Wars was actually incredibly hot about, a year ago, and it's kind of cooled down, honestly. So you have like Ahsoka Tano getting her own show, and all the characters that's going to drive in. This is another example of property that Disney is behind, and they have a ton of characters and storylines that they're going to be bringing. So I think Star Wars is definitely something that makes a lot of sense to me in terms of something to take some shots at, and that might still be undervalued. Like, what about this? So this is the first appearance of Doc Aphra. This is like the rare variant of that Darth Vader #3. You know, who she pops up one of these episodes in Boba Fett or in Ahsoka, and then this book just goes bananas. And it's almost like it's one type of character that we could totally see having a lot of relevance to, you know, this generation that's currently getting involved in what we're talking about. So those are, you know, those are two potentials that, compared to some of these other books, they're not cheap, but compared to some of these other books, they're a lot more, they're easier on the wallet.
So you would consider those spec books?
Spec books in terms of, I think that they aren't cheap, they're not dirt cheap, but I think that there is a potential for a lot of growth still there, because they have not appeared. I mean, we're more and more dependent on, like, what are we seeing on the Disney Plus shows, what's coming to Disney Plus, what's coming to the MCU, more and more. I hate to oversimplify it, but that's a big part of this. And I mean, I know you guys, the VEVE drops, like, that also, it'll be interesting to see, like, some of these, like, I mean, I'll just call them like relatively stagnant. Some of them, not, I'm just talking about, I'm interested to see with the relatively stagnant comics associated with certain drops, if like the VEVE excitement can kind of revive some of these comics in the physical space that have been sort of like flatlined. Like, you know, physical comics don't generally like just drop like crazy overnight. They kind of just flatline. So it's just kind of interesting to see if, like, you know, if the VEVE marketplace reacts to a drop and it happens to be like a comic that's kind of flatlined a bit, if maybe it can actually start reviving some of these comics that are otherwise kind of just, they've cooled off. So
yeah, definitely. Have you attempted to go for any of the drops? I think you mentioned earlier that you went for it today. Have you had any luck?
I own VVs, but like NFTs, but like I have yet to be successful on a drop. And it's like, I'm a very competitive person, so it's very frustrating, but I bought them on the marketplace and I still pick up what I want. But yeah, one of these days I'm hoping to actually get some NFTs on an actual drop. So
yeah, it's crazy because I remember when they first came out, it wasn't even a matter of can I get one, it's like how many should I get? Like we used to just tap through and used to be able, like, how many did you get? I got 15. Oh, I got 16.
Yeah,
you know, it's
like,
just like
I think I got like over 20 on one drop before. Yeah, it's insane.
And never did we ever think that would be a dream. Like they come back, thinking back just like what, 3 or 4 or 5 months, 4 months ago, that was happening compared to what's happening now. It's crazy. I mean, I think it's probably going to get to a point, especially for the more popular comics, they'll definitely increase total editions. I just don't see any way around it. I mean, especially for like AF-15. Can you imagine when that drops? I mean, I think that could be probably an 80K plus total edition run. It's just too popular.
yeah,
It's just too popular.
that book checks all the boxes. I mean, does very well in the supply and demand analysis. But that is, you know, so that's another example. Amazing Fantasy 15. Like, I mean, Spider-Man's the most successful comic character like ever created. So, you know, that definitely relevant. Sony's going to go nuts with this property and they're going to continue in the MCU doing the same. So Spider-Man is going to be there. The supply on this book, there's actually a lot more AF-15s than there are, like, you know, Fantastic Four #1, for example. But like, you know, again, like the demand side of that Spider-Man equation can really overcome that.
And that's what's really exciting too is, you know, Fantastic Four, they're very iconic. They're cemented in pop culture history. And have tremendous historical value as well, but they're characters that aren't really popular outside the comic book community because they haven't been introduced in the MCU. The films that came out were not very good. But so in a way, it's kind of a spec book in a way, which is kind of crazy to say considering the significant value of this comic. But it has tremendous. It's a very valuable comic with insane upside. Oh my gosh, look at that, guys! That is.
Everybody in the community will recognize that one.
Don't put this book. Don't put Fantastic Four down. Marvel's first family. So this is my personal copy of Fantastic Four #1.
Oh my gosh, guys, that's incredible, Ali. Wow.
So yeah, so this book, like I was saying, I think that this book still has potential because what you were talking about, I mean, on the demand side, again, it's like, when we last saw Fantastic Four, let's just say it wasn't super well received. So we're thinking there's room for improvement there. So when this actually becomes more relevant or is perceived as more cool, there's going to be a lot more market entrants searching for this book. So this is my personal copy, just so to kind of translate. So this is graded by CGC, 5.5 off-white pages. The page quality is there under the 5.5. But on this, what makes this a book that I'm not looking to move is that it is actually signed on the first page by both Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. So you might find one of them, Stan signed a lot more than Jack, but to have them both on a book like this, that's really hard to find.
I don't think I've ever seen that, Ali.
Yeah, I didn't think I'd find that, but I found that. And what makes it more incredible, actually, since we're doing show and tell, I guess.
And so everyone knows Jack Kirby is probably the most famous artist of all time, and he's created dozens, if not up to maybe 50 to 100 characters that we all know today in the Marvel Universe. He's absolutely incredible. Oh my gosh.
The brother, X-Men. We talked about this. We talked about this in terms of another franchise that we know the plans for. So I think it's, X-Men's great to invest in as well. But most of the reason why I wanted to show this is because, and I just want to make sure people understand, this is not something you can go out and find. This is also signed by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee on the first page.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So those are the twins. And those stay here. So anyways, that's an example of I sell books all the time. That's what we do. But these two books here, once I sell those, I'm not going to find them again. They're just not going to be there.
And just so everybody knows, that is 100% a Grail comic. And that's, for me, that's a top 10 all-time physical comic book by far. It's absolutely, it's the first appearance of the X-Men, first appearance of Professor Xavier, Magneto. It got so many FAs in there, and it's the start of the X-Men. It's incredible. That's it. Wow, what a piece of history you have there, Ali. It's amazing.
I got sidetracked a bit there, but we were talking about the King of Comics because it had the highest sale ever. So
wow.
Amazing Fantasy 15. Yeah, you mentioned this one hasn't dropped yet. So this particular copy, it's a 2.0, and it's signed by Stan Lee. So it was a witness signature. His signature's right there.
That's incredible. So for everybody knows that the yellow label means that it was a witness signature by CGC. So somebody was actually there from CGC, saw the signature happen in person, and they confirmed that its authenticity. So the last two comics that you saw are the blue labels because the book is entirely intact. But typically, if there's a unverified signature on the front, is it always, do you get a green label, Ali, or do you have the option of you get a green label or a downgraded blue label?
So, and CGC can confirm all this, but I'm pretty sure on this. I am sure, but I just want if you have an unwitnessed signature on the front of the cover, CGC, if they don't you can either get a green label and they'll basically pretend for grading purposes that the signature's not there. They won't authenticate it, but they won't hit the book for that writing on the cover, the signature. That's if you want a green label. You can request, or at least last time I checked, you definitely can request that you just want the blue label and you want to take the hit. So if I had this raw and it wasn't graded, my options would be I could send it into CGC and it would get like a 2.0, right? Or if I wanted a blue label, but they wouldn't say like, oh, it's signed by Stanley. They would just say like Stanley written on the cover, like kind of as a note. That's if I wanted to get it a green label, they would do that. It would stay at 2.0. But if I asked for a blue label, they would basically just grade it and treat Stanley's signature as if somebody just wrote on the cover. So it would take a grade hit. It would probably be, you know, a lower grade, maybe like a 1.5 or a 1.8 or something because of the writing. So that's a little complicated, but this is an example of a witness signature. And when they witness the signature, they do not, the book does not take a hit for the writing, obviously. And they actually authenticate that, yeah, it was in fact Stanley who signed that book. So let me ask you this. So that's an example of a graded book that has a witness signature. That's a 2.0. Would you rather have that? Or would you rather have this? A little higher grade, 4.5, blue label, no signature, huh? Or are they
that's a really good debate. I love that.
So
you know, it's interesting. There's a lot of people who really don't like signatures on the covers, as you know. There are people who are true purists and they just want that original clean cover. But me personally, I'm a huge fan of SIGs. I love signatures out on the covers. So it sounds like you're the same, or you mix between.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought that I'm not a huge signature person, but I'll tell you in my experience, like there are people that are devout about, like they are hardcore, they like love those signatures and they are willing to like make sure they get them.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge signature guy, but you know, when it comes to a book, owning a book that Stan Lee signed, like I mean AF-15, that's like the book to have by Stan Lee, in my opinion. When they do this VEVE drop of AF-15, like at least from the physical comic world, we would expect it to like kind of be a big deal because
I totally agree, because Spencer and I have talked about, and Kevin have talked about that so many times. We fully expect a big gem squeeze, which means like everything, all the prices are going to drop. People are going to try to sell and try to load up for this comic. I can definitely see it happening. Spencer, what do you agree with that?
For sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It's the one comic I'm like, yeah, absolutely. The one comic I'm actually
the whole
really
market's
excited.
gonna dip.
It's going to dip. Yeah. The one comic that I feel like the community may not really fully understand, that I'm very curious to see how they react to it, is Captain America #1. Which to me, I mean, that's for me is a very exciting comic because of whatever it represents. But I mean, the cover's awesome. I mean, who doesn't like seeing Hitler get punched in the face? But also, I think there's only less than 200 copies on the CGC census. And
yeah.
you know, we're kind of diving into that a little bit earlier, but it's a bit misleading for modern age comics, because if a comic isn't really valuable, a lot of people won't get it graded, right? So these comics, they'll just hold on to them. So there's a ton, hundreds, if not thousands of raw comics just sitting around. So, you know, it says on the CGC census it's only 150 for a modern age comic. That's very misleading, because that's not the case.
Yeah.
But with these comics that are the golden age, the silver age, the ones from the 50s and 60s, or in this case, even the 40s, those are much more accurate because people want to get it graded because of the value, because of the upside.
Yeah, and you saw this concept play out pretty recently with Ultimate Fallout 4. Like everybody had that in the poly bags just kind of sitting around, and they didn't really know what to do with it because it wasn't that, you know, it wasn't like the super valuable book. And then it happened, and then everyone's like, oh man, time to take this book out of the poly bag and send it in for grading. And so the census just like blew up once the book spiked, you know. So, you know, and it's just, you're absolutely right. Like just because you look at the census and there's not a ton of graded copies on there, that doesn't mean that they're not out there. They might just, it might just be a thing that like people just, they're holding on to their copies and they're not sending them in because it's just not worth the investment to even get them graded currently. But once it is, they will make that move.
Yeah. And to add on to that with UF4, man, talk about popularity, because that book, it was sitting at $400 as a 9.8 forever. And then boom, it just started shooting up, and now it's settling around 3K as a 9.8. And there's so many comics, graded comics on the CGC census. I think there's over 11,000 copies graded, and then there's maybe 3 to 5,000 9.8s, which is wild. And
Yeah.
it's still sitting around 3,000. I mean, that's a really high market cap, and I don't see it stopping. I mean, especially if we ever see him in the MCU, it's only going to go up in value because there's popularity trumping scarcity.
Yeah, popularity, Trump and scarcity, and I mean, it just seems like a really solid bet that a character like that. I mean, that the generation after me, like that's their Spider-Man. Like that is their Spider-Man. So, and there's a lot of great things about that particular character, especially, in today's kind of world. The narrative that is associated with that character is perfect for our time right now. So I definitely expect that character to be around with us and definitely showing up. I mean, I'd be shocked if that character isn't showing up sooner rather than later.
I 100% agree. I 100% agree. And actually, just back on the topic of popularity and scarcity, I'm very excited to ask you this question about a recent drop on VEVE, Amazing Spider-Man 252. I'm sure you're very familiar with that comic. They dropped that comic in only 1,000 total editions, and the value of that comic went through the roof. I mean, we're seeing the secret rare only having 40 total editions. Typically, there's around 500, and it's available to the public. And the floor right now for that comic, there's only 4 on the market, is $800,000, and there's been confirmed sales for $50,000 for a secret rare.
Wow.
So, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, like, this comic isn't. It's a popular comic, not insanely valuable in the physical world, but here we are in the NFT space, and it's just selling for insane amounts of money. I mean, you can get a 9.9 for like less than 20, probably, right?
Well, I have a few questions actually. So
more questions than answers.
So I don't really have your answers, but I have a few questions. So I and I'm learning this stuff too. So, I consider myself an expert in the physical space, but I'm very interested and learning about the NFT space. So I think that's why our partnership is so great. I understand that like the collectible side, like it has its own set of first appearances, and then like the comic side has its own first appearances. So what is considered the first appearance of Spider-Man in the NFT comic world? Was it the 252 or was it Spider-Man 1?
So the way Marvel and VEVE advertises these comics, they're essentially just digital counterparts, right, of the physical comic books. So we don't really look at it as like FAs are actually based on the statues, the individual characters, like these statues. Those are the FAs of the characters. But then these comic books are just digital counterparts. So really, it's just a digital counterpart of ASM 252. So the first appearance of Spider-Man that will drop is AF15, whenever that inevitably does drop.
Gotcha. So there's not like, is there an actual like FA designation on the first appearances? And what did they designate the FA for Spider-Man, or did they not?
Yeah, the first ever statues for Spider-Man that dropped back in August, those had a first appearance stamp on it, and those were written in the details. And those were the first ever Marvel NFTs. Also, the first appearance of Spider-Man.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's crazy. Those commons were going under retail value back after the drop because the demand wasn't there next to the supply. It was going for like 25 gems, 40 gems, and now the floor is around 1,000 gems, which is wild to think about.
So in the comic space, there hasn't been a comic NFT that has been designated FA for Spider-Man yet?
No, because that would be AF15 officially.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, to get to your question, I mean, it just seems like that's probably more, if I'm understanding right, it seems like it's more of a scarcity thing. Like there weren't as many of those, and it's Spider-Man. And I mean, it is significant. It's actually, I mean, not to say the obvious, but it's a AF15 homage, right? That cover. So there you go.
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, it's a significant book, right? First black suit Spider-Man in the actual Spider-Man series. So that's I don't know. I mean, it seems like it's a scarcity thing there.
Yeah, we feel the same way. It's definitely we've had in-depth conversations about it internally. Yeah, right, Spencer? yeah,
And also like if the competitor currently to that book is Spider-Man 1, I mean Spider-Man 1, it's iconic, but it's definitely, it's not the first appearance of Spider-Man. It's the first appearance of JJ and Chameleon. So that book, it's not AF-15. And there is, and it's, obviously in the physical world, it's definitely a more value. Spider-Man 1 is a more valuable book than Spider-Man 252, but 252 does have, it has some significant first in it as well. So
yeah,
it's a good book.
And that's something we really try to promote as well, is for people to understand that there's a lot of bigger books coming, and Scarcity, investing only in Scarcity can be a big risk, because we don't know what else is going to be more scarce, it's more popular coming out. And that's the most important thing that that the community needs to understand what could potentially be coming, right? So if Jim 83, if the Journey of Mr. 83 drops, if Tales of Suspense 39 drops, there's a lot of really, really valuable comics that are dropping. XMen #1, the one we saw earlier that you have. Yeah, there's a lot of really popular comics dropping, and how is that going to affect the price moving forward? That's the kind of things that everyone needs to think about. But it's exciting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, no, it's super exciting. I mean, I'm fascinated by it myself. So especially your guys' space that's just like getting started. It's going to be very interesting to watch, like how many things carry over, kind of the different relationships, and I'm sure there's going to be like a ton of differences as well. So it's just fascinating to watch and be a part of. I mean, I want us to be part of this as well. Like, I think it's just incredibly exciting. So.
Likewise.
So do you think Marvel is hinting at what characters could potentially be coming to the MCU through the books that they've been dropping through VEVE recently?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't have any insider info there, but I mean, I think they definitely, you would think that they're being strategic about it. Like Marvel has some say about what's actually going to come out and when, but I'm a cautious person, and that's kind of how I think. So like, I just want to, like, you could see why that's a thing, but you could also like, it might not be reflective of like what's coming like on the live action side. It could also just be a play by Disney or Marvel to, assuming they have control or say about what comes and when, to like, boost their print sales or something. Like maybe they actually just want the current generation to be picking up those books in comic book stores, like, and so they're trying to drive some extra demand that way. So, but I think it's a fair bet to think like, yeah, this might be a sign that these characters are coming sooner rather than later to the live action front, but it could also mean something else. So I'd be a little careful with that.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, because you see like Web of Spider-Man 118, which is the first appearance of Ben Reilly, and then you see also, so they dropped the comic book, and then they also dropped his statue, which is the first appearance of Ben Reilly. So we're like, okay, it's a bit aggressive by Marvel. Feels interesting.
Well, we would, at least in the comic world, we have these jokes, just like everyone's gonna be in like the new Spider-Man movie, and no spoilers, but a lot of people were in the new Spider-Man movie, and now we have Enter the Spider-Verse 2 coming, and like that's just a playground for Spider-Man properties. So like, anything Spider-Man related, they're probably coming. Like they're probably coming very soon.
It's so funny too, because I try to balance out speculation with spoilers. Like I don't want to spoil things, but at the same time, like it's important to know this stuff if you want to invest in it, So it's like
it's your guys' show, so you guys can you figure out how much spoiler content you want to have.
Miles Morales is coming to the MCU, confirmed.
You heard it here. We talked about this a little bit before, but I want to go into it a little bit deeper. So do you think that the physical comic collectors are going to adopt NFT comics?
Yeah, so again, like on that, I do think some of them definitely will. Some of them are gonna especially view it as an investment that like uses shared IP that they're familiar with and that they themselves have a connection to. But I also think, you know, there will be some resistance there because there, especially when you're talking about this physical comic world, a lot of that market is really tied to like physical. They want to like hold things, and that's how they grew up. And like, what the heck is this stuff, like fantasy, like, you know, an electronic copy, like what is that? That's not the same. So there's going to be resistance. It's not going to be for everybody, but a lot of people, even if they don't completely understand it, if the sales data is out there and the growth data is out there, they're gonna come to understand that, like, hey, this is a way that I could get some growth. So they might just come in just for the sake of the investment side, even if they don't completely like believe in it or, you know, understand it, you know. So yeah, I think there will be some adoption, but I think the other way, the NFT world coming into the physical world, I think that's an easier transition in a lot of ways, because the NFT crowd, I think they don't really have that bias of like the physical need as much. So, you know, that's not the reason why they got into it in the first place. So
it's so funny.
Yeah. We're seeing so many of the digital collectors want to match up the physical book to what they have in the digital collection. So it's going to be interesting to see if the physical collectors are going to want to do the same thing the other way around and get the digital for their physicals.
Yeah,
I'm very optimistic.
Yeah, no, well, it's exciting. And I mean, again, even myself, like, I don't think my demographic is going to determine this either. Like, at least, like, you know, probably a small percentage of what we're talking about is going to be determined by people even my age. Like, forget about people that are older than me. I think it's the generation ahead of me, like those guys, like, they might easily adopt this, and they might just jump on, and they just might not really have enough information about it. And once they find out, they might completely just hop on board. And so I don't want to hold myself out on an expert of all the different parts of the market. So like I said, I'm excited. I'm as excited as you guys are to kind of see how it all plays out. So
I love telling the story about my brother-in-law, Chad. Big shout out to Chad. He's got a lot of statues. He's a big comic collector. But when I first tried to explain the space to him, he was out. He's hard out. Like, he did not get it, did not want to understand it. But now, once he's got more involved and saw the prices, and also, but most importantly, started playing with AR, and he started learning more about the space. Now he's all in. Now he's excited. He's in our group chat. He's talking about it all the time. And same with my dad. I mean, my dad, it's funny. My dad is so excited about this space now. He's actually convinced a couple of my friends who are stubborn as hell to get involved with VEVE now. And it's like, and there you go. I mean, there's two great examples right there that I never thought would happen. And it's amazing to see the potential where the world of collecting is going, both in physical and digital.
I talked to one of the comic dealers, you know, old school comic dealer that we work with on Elite. We do live sales together. I just talked to him this morning, actually, and I was trying to explain to him why I spent so much time placing the ghost spider, like Spider-Gwen, around the room, and kind of what that was. And it was like explaining my dad, trying to tell my dad how to set up his phone. It was like, it was not working. But I was like, he's like, I don't get it, and I probably won't get it. And then it came up, I mentioned like, oh, the AF-15 hasn't dropped yet in that space. And he's just like, I don't get it, but when that drops, let me know. So there's interest out there, but there's going to be some translation that has to happen for sure, especially coming from the physical side. I think the NFT crowd, I think they'll pick it up a lot faster, because they're going new world to old world. So it's a little easier than trying to, because there's like tech issues involved in the other direction that might be a little harder to overcome.
I've always looked at Elite Comics 11 as the foundation of innovation for buying comics. So I'm really excited that you guys are into this too. And man, yeah, it's going to be a really, really fun journey.
Definitely. I'm excited. No, it's been great working with you guys, and I think we're just getting started. So
what's an important piece of advice that you would give to new comic investors?
We were talking about doing your research. You gotta do your research. You gotta get knowledgeable in the keys. You gotta like look at things like Scarcity, and then you gotta like you got to do as much as you can to try to look ahead. You want to get in, you want to buy low, right? And you want to sell high if you're going to sell, or you just want to buy low because it's only going to get more expensive from here on out. So you want to do your research and project. You just want to be, we talked about it earlier, like, you want to look for news sources. You don't want to overreact. You want to kind of trust your own process and your own conclusions about what's going to be more relevant in the future. Weigh that against scarcity and figure out like where you want to put your money. And sometimes you're going to get it right. Sometimes you're going to get it wrong. And honestly, with everything that's been going on these past couple years, it would have, I don't know anyone who's predicted these past couple years correctly. So
in a good way.
I know in a good way in terms of growth in our industry.
Exactly.
Yeah. But there's a lot of people who walk away from the past couple years as like, patting themselves on the back as if they were geniuses or something. But it was really just, they couldn't have predicted exactly how things were going to play out. So you just, even though it seems like everything's working, you really got to do your own work, do your own research, feel comfortable about your process, what you want to invest in. And you're only going to be able to feel comfortable objectively if you actually do the work. So I believe in you prepare, you work hard, and then you let it ride. Like, but you got to do that prep work first. Like that would be my advice.
And to add to that, we actually made a video called Key Grails and Spec Books, the importance and why you need to know what they are. You can find that on our YouTube channel, but it's so important, guys. You got to do your research. The more you know, the better better investor you'll become.
And I will say, like, I mean, as people are going out there and they're learning about this, like, feel free to reach out to Elite Comics 11, message us. I mean, we might not be able to get back to you right away on kind of these, like, do you think this is good? Do you think this is good? But like, we definitely will try our best to like, be a resource for those kind of questions. So I just, especially the people on Twitter and people that follow your channel, like, I just want them to understand that like Elite Comics 11, we're happy to help. And I think our reputation speaks for itself. Like, I'm against just pitching crazy spec based on nothing. I'm not going to tell you I know exactly what's going to happen with a certain book, but I'm happy to share our personal opinions on things and, just kind of share information. Like that's something that I think is important because people did that for me when I needed it. So.
Well, Ali, I just want to say thank you again for coming on today, man. It's it's been such a fun time talking comics with you, and I'm very excited for this journey together, man. This is incredible.
Yeah, likewise. I appreciate both of you, and I'm very excited about this partnership and just to kind of actively experience like this, just whatever this is. Whatever it's going to become, like it's going to be, I'm very excited to experience it along with you guys and the people watching out there. If you just remember, like Elite Comics 11, we are a great source for these physical books if you want to pair them up with your NFTs, but we're also a good resource if you just want information. So do your research. If you still have questions, especially in the physical world, like that's what we're here for.
Comics and crypto and comics collect.